Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Let's get after it.
This goes back to the book of Genesis in the Bible, where it says that all mankind had one language. But I feel that people are too focused on the actual, what I call guttural utterances, which is speech, basically. When a long time ago, it makes more sense to me that a universal one world language would be sharing thoughts and emotions. And this comes up time and time again in the movies and in books and in fiction. Where does that even come from? The source of that is that it's very real. It's just that we have forgotten about the conditions of the world that we live in and how they change.
You're kind of saying that even thought and ideas are a closed loop. When we watch fiction and we watch sci-fi, we think these ideas are some artist's creativity. Really, it's all coded information. We just don't have the context from which it came.
So we just come across this theory for the first time in yesterday's video, and I really like it. It makes me think of all the technology we've seen in movies and stuff that comes to fruition 15, 20 years later. And the fact that the government has all these secret programs where they're building this technology and keeping it hidden from us, and they're just revealing it in movies to do a slow rollout of that technology. It's not outside the realm of possibility that they did the same thing with telekinesis, only in reverse. They're showing us in movies what we used to be capable of, or it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility that they're working on some sort of telekinesis program or telekinetic technology that they're planning on rolling out. But I really like this idea that we used to communicate without words. It makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but it makes a lot of sense, I think.
5 miles of underground Vatican archives.
Right. That's a lot.
There's been a few people that have come out talking who have had access to these Vatican archives. They can't say specifically everything they saw, but one guy did come on a documentary on History Channel years ago and talked about the fact that they had bones of beings that weren't human. From their perspective, they weren't human bodies. They had books and texts down there that nobody's ever been able to read or access that talk about technology, flying devices, and all these other incredible things that were hidden during the Inquisitions. Because during the Inquisitions, they were suppressing technology heavy because they wanted to keep their boot on the necks of the people. The Inquisitions were so brutal, they killed over 80 million people over the course of 700 years, ordered underneath the popes. That really held us back because we should have been on the moon in the 1800s if it wasn't for the Inquisitions.
This makes me think in the near future we may actually get access to those archives, because with the current attack on Christianity that we're experiencing in the world today, that's going to trickle over to other religions, especially those that follow God. So eventually this attack on Christianity, if it reaches a melting point where you've actually got people afraid to speak up and say I'm a Christian, they're going to start going after the other Christian adjacent religions next. So they'll go after Catholicism eventually. And those archives will be opened up to the public, or at least opened up to where someone can go in there and dig around. So in my opinion, I think that we will eventually get some answers of what's in there. I just don't think it's going to be revealed in the way it should be revealed, where they just openly let us know what's going on.
You call NASA the ultimate doomsday preppers. Do you think there are other clues you could point to show the elite know about this and are preparing for the next round?
Yeah, the architecture that's used the world across, all of the different deep underground bases and bunkers and things that have been constructed. For example, we have NORAD, which is a huge facility that's built into a mountain. And the cover story has never really made a lot of sense to me, that it's to protect it from some missile across either ocean that has to go across way more other military bases and installations and stuff. And then they also have the new Space Force, and all of this stuff has to do with with the elite preparing for survival. For me, NASA is a government agency. If there is a physical barrier in the sky that only opens from time to time, then those beings are stuck in here with us. Every creature in here is essentially stuck in here until the time comes when the door opens.
This is the first I've heard of there being a door that potentially opens, and I'm assuming he's talking about a firmament, but I'm absolutely of the belief that if there are aliens here, that they're not from another planet, but they've been here the entire time, and they're just interdimensional beings, or something that we can't freely see with the naked eye, or at least that we can't freely see them with the naked eye whenever they're using their cloaking technologies, because I think that they're just highly advanced, so they have ways of hiding themselves, and they're probably overhead all the time and we just don't see it. But I'm definitely on board with this idea that they've been here and they'll continue to be here, that they're trapped here like we are because we can't get off this planet because of the Van Allen radiation belt. And if it will destroy our anatomy, I would assume that it will destroy theirs as well.
Could this be how the pyramids were made? I saw this, it caught my attention. I was thinking, this could be a method that they used. And then I dove a little bit deeper. I was saying, maybe if they had this, but then added some kind of mold to it, and maybe if they were using the right slurry or the right mixture, this would be possible. So let's add a mold to the equation and then consider what we're adding to this. Maybe they're scraping the bottom of the Nile, all the recently deceased animals, knowing full well that their shells containing calcium and other minerals, when compressed and using a mold, would make these perfect cubes. And if you already had a stone set in place, you only need this half piece. You fill it up with your slurry, you pack it down, you remove the mold, you get to the next block. So they're not bringing in these giant boulders and dragging them up. They're just pouring the slurry on the spot, packing it down, and that would explain the perfect symmetry, how they're lined up so perfect where you couldn't even get a credit card or a human hair in between them. What do you guys think?
There could be something to this. I don't personally think that this is how the pyramids were constructed. For one thing, it's usually the simplest explanation is the best explanation. But in this particular circumstance, I don't think that this applies, because all the stones are different sizes, and you've got some that are more square, you've got some that are more rectangular. If they were using a mold, every stone would be identical. And I would assume that would be most people's first guess, if that were the case, that the stones were manufactured, not that they were just mined from somewhere. Hey, if you're enjoying this video and you like this kind of content, I make a new one just like it every day, Monday through Friday. It'd be awesome if you'd hit that subscribe button and come back tomorrow to join me.
Breaking news. I genuinely cannot believe I am actually saying this, but there you go. There's been a lot happening in space recently, including, of course, the northern lights that were visible across the world, and especially the UK, which is something that I never thought would be possible. And when I said I didn't think it would actually going to happen, but it did, so that just makes this even crazier again. And there's been some new news recently, which is just, I mean, to say I'm gobsmacked would be an understatement. To say with other news and literal, proof of life on another planet, I don't even know what's crazy anymore. It proposed to build a new skyscraper in New York, and it would look something like this. And at first probably thinking, well, how's it, there's nothing attaching it to the ground. Because it's not. Yeah. I have so many questions, it's not even funny. They proposed to hang this skyscraper across New York, from the sky, dangling from a meteor. How the hell is that gonna work? Genuinely thought it was like an April Fool's or some kind of joke, but it's real. They are actually proposing to do this. They're actually gonna do this. Of course, this isn't going to be a 5-minute job. I'm not saying they've started building it already, but they are proposing it and are genuinely trying to do this. But please, somebody tell me how. How are they going to attach a building to a meteor? This is real. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, hit that follow button and I'll keep you updated.
This honestly feels like someone's trolling everybody. This doesn't seem like a real thing. It could be America's answer to Saudi Arabia's The Line. It could just be the next person trying to make a name for themselves, thinking they're going to make the craziest structure that's been built. I don't see this one coming to fruition. How would you even get people into the building? And think of the logistics of living in a building like that. If it was physically possible for them to do this, and I have no idea if it's possible or not. It could very well be completely possible and feasible. But imagine you live in a building that's dangling. How do you get in and out of it? Imagine the logistics of trying to get from the building back down to the planet. And wouldn't you have the fear of something destroying that comet or getting hit by an outside force or the comet moving? Is it just stationary, hanging in this one spot over New York City? How long has it been there? Is it going to stay there? There's just a lot of unknowns right there that I think are probably going to be overlooked to try to push this project forward, because people usually don't think things through. It's interesting nonetheless. I guess we'll see if they actually start trying to build this thing. It's kind of funny if you think about it, though. They're going to have to train guys like me to go up in space to start attaching all the foundation structure and stuff to the comet. Might have some redneck astronauts before long. That'd be kind of cool.
We're hearing that Vince McMahon was trafficking the women that worked for WWE, making them wrestlers and other executives and CEOs. He was the pimp of WWE, and he's putting himself front and center in the ring on the stage, and it's very much like Diddy. You think you would take a back seat. You think you would keep the spotlight off of you because of all the stuff you're doing, but no, they're hiding in plain sight. They're household names, and they're some of the biggest abusers we have. So we're only in April, and we've had HBO covering Nickelodeon's dirty laundry. We have the Vince McMahon WWE stuff, and now we got the Diddy stuff.
It's interesting that all these things have been coming up so often over the years, and I think people have been sort of keeping their head buried in the sand about it. And like you said, how more mainstream shows are talking about these subjects now. I'm not shocked that Vince McMahon might have been doing some of these things, because I think you become so important, and I don't know what happens. People lose their minds and they start doing these horrific things, and there's just so many examples of it that it's no longer a conspiracy theory. It's a fact.
I think my favorite part about all this is that it's the level of the people that are getting caught. Like, these are like the highest up in their field, in their organization, and they're getting caught. This is, in my opinion, going to scare the heck out of anybody who's thinking about walking this path in the future, and deter them from making the same choices that Puff Daddy made and that Vince McMahon made, and prevent them from doing stuff like Cosby. I think this stuff is great because it's going to, I feel like all this stuff being exposed is actually going to put an end to it, because people are going to realize they're not safe anymore. They can't get away with what they used to get away with. In the day of the internet, everything comes out.
Flat earthers might be onto something here. Did you know that underwater sea cables account for 99% of our communication? Well, they do. And if we look at the map of underwater sea cables, we find something quite bizarre. Australia, South America, and Africa have no direct connecting cables apart from one. Why is this bizarre? Well, let's take a look at the flat Earth map. These three continents are the furthest away from each other, so far away that it would be ridiculous to even connect them when they can run through the center of all continents. And what about the odd one out, the little bit of connecting cables from South America to Africa? Well, you see, if we look back at the flat Earth map, it actually shows that the two regions that connect this line of sea cables are extremely close at those 2 points. So it makes sense to have cables running through. This same concept goes for flight paths and emergency stops. Many of them don't make any sense on a globe Earth map, but make complete sense according to the flat Earth one. So, do the flat earthers have a valid point here, or are you still not convinced? Yet.
What's making them go around? They don't make sense. Then you find out NASA owns 98% of the helium. Then you find out all these satellites that crash have balloons attached to them. Then you can deduce they actually float these satellites up with balloons. It's that simple. If all these satellites are moving 17,500 miles an hour, some are moving this way, some are moving that way, it's common sense. There's 50,000 of them. They're supposed to hit each other eventually, but none of them hit each other. Come on, guys. Wake up.
And majority of all the transmissions we use for our cell phones or quote-unquote satellite TV are all ground towers. They all send transmissions from the ground tower to tower, admittedly at high elevations. And of course, we have underground and undersea cables that make up 99.9% of all transmission. So
I threw this in here because I'm not a flat earther, but this stuff doesn't make any sense to me. The flight patterns, the underground cables, just the fact that we use those underground cables instead of the satellites. What is the point of all these satellites up in space? And why are they floated up on balloons? Why do they tell us that they're shot up in rockets if they're clearly floating them up in balloons? And how are they going 17,000 miles an hour, or however fast he said, if they've got a balloon attached to them? That doesn't make any sense. That balloon would get shredded at 17,000 miles an hour. The slightest little thing that come into contact with it would just blow it apart. They definitely wouldn't be floating back down to the ground with the balloon still intact. So this is just one of those things that frustrates me because I can't find an easy answer to it. And the fact that NASA lies to us about absolutely everything and is proven to lie over and over and over again, giving us false information, false photographs. I just find this frustrating, and that's why I put it in here. I've gotten a lot of comments in the past about why these flight patterns are the way they are and stuff like that makes sense to the person leaving the comment, but I've never gotten a response that makes sense to me. So if you've got one, drop it in the comments below.
In 2002, one of the greatest military hacks ever took place, and it was done by this guy, Gary McKinnon. He hacked into NASA looking for evidence of free energy suppression and UFO technology. But what he found in there was even more strange. Upon hundreds of thousands of photos proving that NASA deliberately was photoshopping UFOs out of satellite imagery, he found a secret spreadsheet titled Non-Terrestrial Officers. In it, he claims he saw the names and ranks of U.S. Air Force personnel that were never registered anywhere on this planet. in one of the files, he actually said that he saw documentation of ship-to-ship transfers in the orbit of Earth. Before he was able to download and save any of the files, a NASA employee spotted him on the servers of the computer and logged him out. Eventually, he was arrested and everybody started calling him a hoax. However, in 2019, the United States announced the Space Force, which made people start to believe that Gary McKinnon was actually telling the truth. So that begs the question in the end, were these transfers between ourselves? Were they from other spacefaring nations? Or were these transfers between other creatures out there in the universe, in the galaxy, coming far, far away?
To me, this sounds a bit far-fetched, and probably because it goes directly against everything that we know right now about how these creatures got here or where they came from. All the evidence seems to point in the direction that they've been here longer than we have, and they've just been in hiding. And this guy's saying that there's direct transfers out in outer space. We have no evidence of that. We have no evidence of anything entering our atmosphere from outer space. We have no evidence of anything leaving our atmosphere. And with the plethora of UFO videos and stuff that we've got right now, you would think that there would eventually be something that showed something shooting out of our atmosphere. But we have nothing. So we have tons of video footage of things going underwater and shooting off away from the camera very, very rapidly, but nothing's going out of the atmosphere. Those things are here with us. They're not coming in and checking us out. They're here. They've been here. And in my opinion. So that makes it a little hard for me to believe this guy's story.
He writes that this crop circle, was man-made. But, I didn't feel any otherworldly sensations while inside it. But there was this increasing concern that a farmer might find me. So he's like, okay, I'm going to get out of here. He's snapped a couple of photographs with his phone and he bails out. So nothing that's unusual that other people report. He runs out of the crop circle with this fear that a farmer's going to find him when all of a sudden it dissipates. It stops. And he's like, I stopped dead in my tracks, as if compelled to do so by some external thought. I instantly knew that I had to go back. I had to go back into the formation. So he does. He goes, says he sees a male figure. He's like, I didn't see anyone else around. Like, there was no one else around. And he writes, as I got closer, I saw that he was looking directly at me, and around hung what appeared to be an expensive camera with this, oddly large telephoto lens. It was huge. It was just
comically large.
Comically large and off. Okay.
Why would you need such a large, high-focus lens when the view of the circle...
From over it, you take a drone.
It only works when you have an aerial view.
Right. So he's like, was it a farmer? No. And given the camera, he was more likely to be a fellow crop circle hunter, or perhaps even one of the circle makers, and I approached within a few feet and I could see him clearly now. His appearance was completely innocuous, apart from the massive lens, obviously. He was a medium height, wore glasses, a polo shirt, slacks, early 40s, perfect English accent. First thing this man says to him is, I'm just taking in the scenery. And Robbie says it immediately rang as false. His tone, his body language, something was not quite right. It was like he was making an excuse. There was something off about this guy. I told him that there was a crop circle that was just further down the field, and naturally I assumed that he would jump at the chance to photograph it. He was like a Terminator. He just didn't understand. It was like he couldn't process what a crop circle was. He's like, he seemed, he writes, to be completely uninterested. Now Robbie climbs over the gate. And he says, oh, you just have to jump over the gate. And the guy walks up to the gate almost like he's about to walk through it. Robbie's
what is a gate?
Robbie says he doesn't know what a gate is. He turns to Robbie and he says, how do I get into the field?
Oh my God.
And this is a really...
Like butting into it like an NPC.
Yeah. This is a strange question, considering he also just watched me climb over the gate at that very moment. And he's like, you just climb over the gate, I replied.
What is climb?
Yeah. So he looked at the gate, clearly confused, before cautiously stepping onto the lower bar, and it was like he'd never climbed a gate before. He was unable to balance himself. He raised his camera up with one hand and slapped what appeared to be 3 continuous, completely random pictures of the general area, like he was pretending like he knew what he was doing. And Robbie says, look, I'm feeling very unsettled at the moment. I said a quick goodbye to the man and headed swiftly back to the woods. And he'd been walking for less than a minute when he noticed that the man was following him and gaining pace. Now, he walked and Robbie sped up and the guy sped up with him, and he finally, nowhere, he's like, Robbie's saying it was awkward. And the man just says, do you believe that there is life on other planets?
Oh, God.
And Robbie's like, sure. I mean, we're not alone. It's a pretty much a scientific consensus that maybe there's something out there. But there's a big difference, he says, between aliens being out there and down here. They're two very different, topics. Very rapidly replied. And he said, not only do I believe that there's life in the universe, because Robbie asked him the same question, I believe that other life forms are here now and interacting with us. And Robbie's like, what the hell? In fact, he even used like WTF. He's like, what the hell is this? Like, this is so strange. Now, he said everything is getting weirder and weirder. And the guy starts talking about life in the universe when all of a sudden he stops, right? He stops mid-sentence and totally flips out. Robbie said that as they were walking past, there was a spider's web with a leaf hanging in it, twirling in the wind, which is typical. You go into the woods, you see it.
Yeah.
It's a mundane sight for you or me or anything. This guy was like, what the hell is that? What is it? And he's like, Robbie's like, it's a leaf. You don't have to worry about it. This guy apparently started backing away until he knew he was a safe distance from it and didn't take his eyes off. Robbie's like, I cannot understand what I was seeing. I explained to him what it was, but he didn't understand. And what's your name? And I told him, and he just simply responded that his name was Hassan or Hassan. He couldn't quite hear. He spoke very quietly. But they reached the crossroad and he just got the hell out of there. The man just kind of said, nice speaking to you. And he made this point of shaking his hand. And this is the Men in Black kind of thing. He's like, while he was flesh and blood, his grip was weak and strange. I looked down at my forearm and all the hairs were standing up as if electricity had shot through my entire body. It was like, it wasn't even a sense of anxiety or adrenaline. There was like, when he touched that guy's arm, it had shot something electrically into his body. He said, I had to stand there until it kind of just dissipated from within him.
I just put that in here because I thought it was a really interesting story that everyone would enjoy. And I wanted to use it to segue into a small announcement. On our podcast, Dave and I have decided that we're going to allow users to call in and share paranormal experiences with us or UFO sighting experiences. We think that would be very interesting and it would be fun for you guys and make the podcast more interactive. So that's something that we're working on. I bought the device here that will allow me to plug a phone directly into our audio interface without getting any feedback, so it'll have really good clear audio on the calls. The way we intend to source the callers is over in the Discord. So if you're in the Discord and you have an interesting story that you think would be something people would enjoy listening to on the podcast, drop me a line, tag me in it, and let me know that you have a story. I'll send you a friend request, and then you can share that story with me through direct message, and we will set up a time and date for you to call in and be on the podcast if that's something that interests you. So I just wanted to make that quick announcement, and now we'll go on to the next clip.
Remember I talked about the giants of South America? The Aztecs talked about, before the Aztecs were there, giants roamed the land. These giants were created by a god, but they opposed another god. There's 3 times this god tried to kill all the giants. One of the first times that he tried to kill them was by sending fire from the sky. It killed almost everything, but a few giants survived. And then they say that this god ended up flooding the whole earth to kill these giants. There was one giant. He survived with his siblings. What they did right after that flood was they're like, we're going to build a giant pyramid, so if it ever floods again, we can escape it. So this pyramid that they built was called the Great Pyramid of Cholula, the largest pyramid on Earth volume-wise. They say it's one of 6 pyramids that were built on top of each other. We're talking a massive Tower of Babel-like thing.
Yeah.
Tower of Babel happened after the flood, and these giants built this pyramid to escape the flood after the flood.
That's an interesting theory. I dig that, dude. That's fun.
Unless I'm misinterpreting what he's saying, I think he's trying to say that the Tower of Babel was built by giants and it was a pyramid. Only problem I got really with that is it doesn't make any sense with the actual story of the Tower of Babel. That it was, because the story goes that it was built by people to try to reach heaven, not to escape floods, and that the languages were divided amongst the people as a punishment for trying to build this structure. So giants don't really fall into play there. For that reason, this theory is a little harder for me to get behind, just because the story is such a well-ingrained, such a well-known story, and it doesn't mention giants at all. And giants are mentioned in the Bible, so I feel like if the Tower of Babel had something to do with giants, it would have been mentioned.
They buried 200 pyramids at Giza in Africa, right there in Cairo.
Wow.
buried with the sand. We just discovered that on ground penetrating radar. There's 200 more pyramids buried
Holy
there.
crap.
Yeah, when you look at the second pyramid war that's talked about in the Sumerian tablets, you discover that one of the Anunnaki beings named Anu, he was like the head of the gods. He told his son and his other son, both of his sons, to forebode and to leave, which was meant get out of here. But before they did, he told them to take everything with you. So they took the caps off some of the pyramids that broke the functionality. They stripped the interior technology from some of these pyramid structures. All the temples, they stripped the technology out of them. Göbekli Tepe, buried from sand, that's not even from Turkey. Okay, from 400 miles away, they took and brought there to bury Göbekli Tepe, which dates humanity back another 13,000 years. And so all these sites from around the world, we're discovering a lot of the high-tech stuff has been taken away or buried or broken.
I wonder how they were able to bury them.
If you're going to bury an entire site like Göbekli Tepe or an entire plateau like Giza, you need something that can carry millions of tons of sand. And you're not going to drag it on the ground.
Yeah.
You've got to, first of all, be able to dig it, which means you need some type of machinery.
Hearing him talk about us having technology given to us and then taken away makes me think back to NASA saying we used to have the technology to go to the moon, but we don't have it anymore. And it makes me wonder, was that technology given to us because we use such rudimentary tools to supposedly get there, and now we've got all this advanced technology and we can't figure out how to go again? Doesn't make any sense unless we were gifted some sort of advanced technology that they couldn't share with the world, and they used that to get to the moon, but then that was taken away from them because whatever reason they decided we couldn't have it anymore.
Inventor and author Dr. Richard Haynes is seen here working with his computerized research file of over 3,000 UFO sightings by commercial and military pilots. Because good eyesight and sharp abilities of observation are required to become a professional pilot, Dr. Haynes believes that the testimony of these credible witnesses cannot be ignored.
We're not dealing with mental projections or hallucinations on the part of the witness, but with a real physical phenomenon.
One of the most thoroughly investigated cases in Dr. Haynes' file involves the near collision of a UFO with a United States Army helicopter piloted by Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Coyne and his crew. While flying over Mansfield, Ohio at 11 p.m. on October 18, 1973, they observed a bright red object which paralleled their craft and then rapidly moved toward them on a collision course.
I looked out the window and observed this light moving at a very excessive speed, in excess of 600 knots, coming at the helicopter. It looked like a locked-on missile.
A family of 5 in a car observed the strange red object on a collision course with Colonel Coyne's helicopter. They pulled off the road to watch.
The thing that makes this particular evening a unique experience was that it was almost a mid-air collision with an object that you know as a UFO. We did not know it was such until it was on top of the helicopter, and that took just a matter of minutes.
Colonel Coyne put the helicopter into a dive to try to avoid impact. When he and his crew looked up, the object was keeping pace with them.
While it was in this position, the green light came out from the undercarriage of the UFO.
Colonel Coyne cut the power and set the controls for a steep dive. In spite of this, the helicopter was pulled upward toward the UFO from an altitude of 1,700 feet to an altitude of above 3,700 feet. Colonel Coyne and his crew observed the strange UFO at close range for approximately 2 minutes.
The object that I viewed that particular evening had a high degree of technology. It was composed of a structure and a design that we do not have. The object can move through the atmosphere without causing any turbulence. It can move at high speeds below 10,000 feet. There are no vertical or horizontal stabilizers, no landing gear, no source of propulsion reflected on the craft. Looks like it could fly in space.
This document is the result of years of investigation into Lieutenant Colonel Coyne's helicopter encounter with a UFO. It verifies the facts just presented to you. Lieutenant Colonel Coyne felt so strongly about his UFO experience that he became part of a delegation to the United Nations that tried to encourage the UN to deal with the subject of UFOs.
51 years ago, and it sounds like that guy's telling a story from yesterday. It sounds exactly like the depictions of the crafts that we're hearing today. I find that absolutely fascinating. It's interesting to me to see eyewitness testimony spanning such a wide range of time where all of the details of the witness match up with somebody they never met from a different part of the world from 50 years later. That's just amazing. I think that right there is more evidence than some of this congressional testimony that we get. I think whenever they release all this eyewitness testimony and stuff and unredact everything and just let us start digging through it, I think that some internet investigators are going to put the pieces together and start figuring out what's actually going on here. And hopefully that day is coming soon. I know I keep hearing a lot of stuff about a big dump that's coming. Unfortunately, it's Dr. Greer that keeps talking about it, and I'm not a big fan of Dr. Greer. I think he's a grifter. He could prove me wrong. So hopefully whenever he does have this big data dump that he keeps talking about, it actually has something of value in it. But guys, I'm going to go ahead and leave the video right there. I hope you enjoyed these clips we watched together today. I'll be back tomorrow with another video, so don't forget to come back and join me. Also, don't forget to post your photos of you wearing your merch in the Discord. That way you can get your photo in the videos. Thank you to everyone who's done that so far. I really appreciate it. It's been really cool to see a bunch of people wearing shirts that I designed. I never really thought I'd see that before, so that's really cool. But I'm going to go ahead and end it right there. I hope everybody has a great, safe, fantastic rest of your evening, and I will see you tomorrow.